As we said, just about everybody out there, at least the Republicans right now, are announcing they're going to be running for president. I think we're up to what we said earlier, Brian, about 1,000 candidates right now, I think. I'm kidding. I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but this is a time, a year from now, it's hard to believe, a year from now, we'll be talking about the Iowa caucuses. Yes, we will. And so, people are starting to make plans for 2016. So one of our senators comes up for re-election in 2016, and one of the guys who ran against him last time in a very spirited race, Joe Sestak, who's a former congressman, admiral of the U.S. Navy, former admiral, and former candidate for the Democratic Party against Pat Toomey. Will he be running against him in 2016? We will ask him that this morning, but we're glad to be joined here in the new year by Joe Sestak. It has been a while, my friend. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me back. It's a real pleasure.
Great to have you on, Joe. And, first question I'll ask you, are you going to run again next year against Pat Toomey?
Yes, I am.
There you go. So already I can tell you've been away from politics for a while because you just give me a straight answer. You've always given me a pretty straight answer anyway, but you gave me a straight answer right there, so that's good. Tell me what is getting you to go back into and run for this again? What are the things that are motivating you?
Well, first, I think the biggest deficit we got in America is trust. Nobody trusts anyone, particularly politicians. I was Navy captain of a ship before I became an admiral, and I'll tell you, if you could galvanize the crew if they trusted you, and by trust, what I mean is, are you willing to be there when things go wrong? Are you willing to say, I'm accountable, I'm the guy that should have gotten it right? How can anybody trust anyone when they feel they're above accountability? Who down in Washington, D.C. ever says, hey, look, I'm accountable for not finding the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I'm accountable for Wall Street because, who is held accountable for that? Hey, I'm accountable for the middle class, the working families. When I talk about jobs, not getting jobs. And so that's why I want to run. I look, my life was service. I want to continue it.
I think one of the things, and you kind of alluded to it there, that the American people, I believe, are feeling, and again, at least the ones I talk to, you talked about being a captain or an admiral of a ship or a fleet. You had to do something. You couldn't talk about something and say, well, I wish we could go over there. I wish we could take our fleet here. You had to actually do something. And there's so much now of this talking things to death, and nothing seems to get done. And we see it from both Democrats and Republicans alike. And I think there's equal criticism out there to be had for both, because we've kind of gotten into this culture where that's acceptable. And for many Americans, I think they've gotten to a point, as you rightly point out, to say that's not acceptable anymore. We need to see some results here. There's too much of this logjam and just sitting back, and we're not really going anywhere at all.
You hit it on the head. Accountability is about answering for one's deeds, not one's words. I remember I went back to 100 of the churches and all that I had visited during my campaign, and I remember one pastor said to me, Joe, I'll know when you're a good public servant when what you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. And politicians talk. Look, I'm accountable for not having one. No one else. I'm to blame. I should have been better. But that's what I want to bring. I'm not asking people to always agree with me. But you know what? We kept our office open 7 days a week when I was a congressman, up to 9 o'clock every night. Because if people had an issue, we wanted them to come and be able to walk in and not say it's only an 8 to 5 job. And they could come in, and people didn't agree with me on an issue. Every Saturday morning, I set aside 2 hours to have group meetings. Didn't mean how to agree, but they had to have the trust that they could tell me what they disagreed with and then hold me accountable if I was not going to agree with them. That's okay.
You and I have known each other now for a while, it seems, and we have disagreed on occasion, we've agreed on occasion, but I've always held you in high esteem, and I have some people that write to me after saying, how could you have Joe Sestak on? I said, because Joe Sestak, I believe, is an honest man, and I believe you are. One of the things I remember when you were running against Pat Toomey last time is when a whole lot of other people were running from Obamacare. You stood up and said, I'm not sure it went far enough. There are some things I would have done that would have made it even better for people, in your opinion. Now, you and I disagreed on Obamacare, and there's no problem with that. Honest people could have a disagreement. But You came out and said that at a time where maybe, who knows, if you'd have run like a lot of the other Democrats did, maybe you could have won. I don't know. We'll never know the answer to that question. But your thoughts about that?
Yes. I would do it all again exactly that way. Look, the only reason, as an independent for 31 years, registered independent, I only became a Democrat because, frankly, I just wanted to work on health care after my daughter, as you well know, got brain cancer. And I wanted to pay back everyone because they took care of my family when I was in the military with TRICARE, the health care that you all provided there. And look, I'd do it all again. Do I think it was perfect? No. But I'll tell you this, that we were losing $100 billion a year because of the under and the uninsured, because they get sicker and they're doing it. That means the United States was losing productivity, and so that is a major reason why I did it. I think you're going to see that, by the way, you're going to see me on this campaign standing up and roaring the benefits and roaring the faults of Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, to improve it. But I got to tell you, right now, it is a major increase of health benefits for people.
It is for people, and yet at the same time, you talked about laying out what some of the benefits are, and I don't disagree that there are benefits in there that are really good. And I think to help anybody to be insured in this country who is not insured is a good thing. I think we need to look out for people. Yet at the same time, there are a lot of people who were insured before who are now paying a lot more. It has become far more inconvenient and not as affordable for a lot of people. The bureaucracy has also become much, much different. And even for many people who have gotten, for example, benefits in terms of subsidies, tax time comes, you're going to hear a lot of screaming and moaning at that time too as well. So if you can, in as objective a way as possible, pick it apart a little bit for us and tell us what you see as good from Obamacare right now and what you see as maybe needing some real improvements.
Yes. Look, up until the day the Affordable Care Act was passed, health care costs in America went up on average 8% every year. Since this has been passed, it's gone up on average every year 3.5%. We've begun to slow the rise of costs. We haven't got it all under control yet. Number two, if over half the people who are in the Obamacare, the health insurance exchange, millions signed up, if half of them change to a different plan this year, they will save $1,200 on average. Why? Because there's been a 50% increase of private health insurance companies that said, oh, my gosh, this is working. Mm-hmm. And they now have said, I'm going to get in there. Look, the insurance plan is nothing but an eBay. You can now go on and decide, I want to buy that kind of toothpaste or that type of toothpaste. It's the private market working more fairly, because you don't have just two big health insurance companies like we have in Pennsylvania, Highmark and Blue Cross, that dominate 80% of all health care insurance plans in Pennsylvania. Now you can go on insurance market and say, I want to pick that new insurance company's plan. $1,200 is being saved. And you know what? You got a kid, he's covered, she's covered to 26. Now, do we have to do more? You bet we do. But I got to tell you, it's a hell of a lot better than it was.
So when you look, though, at a lot of people in the country who have been inconvenienced, we see employers in some cases going to a more part-time workforce. We're seeing the average wage, for example, dropped last month amidst some of the good news we had last week. The average wage dropped for the first time in a long time. And a lot of people are laying that at the feet of Obamacare, at least in part, that we are turning this country into part-time America. How do you answer that?
Here's how I answer it. The medium level of income, the exact level for working families, the very middle of all working families, has not increased for over 22 years. Even last year, we got a bigger problem. For 22 years, since the middle, we have not had an increase in the median income. So first of all, that's a problem we got to deal with on job creation. Got that. But step back right now. The employers in Pennsylvania who provide health care, their premiums, according to a private study that was just completed 2 months ago, are higher than on the Affordable Care Act website. In fact, the second lowest premiums in all of America are in the western part of Pennsylvania. Look, do we have to change that mandate of 50 people? Sure we do. When I voted for it the first time in the House, it wasn't in there. The Senate stuck it in. Shame on them. And that's why I want to go to the Senate to change that portion of it, improve it, but don't throw it away. Because, 10 years ago, up until 2010, on average, 170 of Pennsylvanians were losing their health care every day. And basically, we in America, the government was saying, just, you're on your own. Yeah. No. We are making sure that the private market is working better. That's why these private health insurance companies are jumping in, doubling down this year.
We're talking with Joe Sestak, former Admiral of the U.S. Navy, former Congressman. Joe, one of the things I listened to in November, when the Republicans won pretty resounding victories around the country in just about any category you won, except for maybe the governorship here in Pennsylvania, is the idea that people are tired of talking about dividing up this country. We hear people ad nauseum talking about the middle class, when we ought to be talking about all Americans. A lot of us, self-included, are kind of annoyed that we continue to hear people talking about the middle class, and yet it's the middle class that keeps on getting screwed. So for all the talk, the middle class is taking a hit. Why aren't we talking about all Americans in our conversations instead of just this focus on the middle class all the time, which seems to be like a bouncing ball that moves to wherever people want to move it depending on the situation they want to talk about?
Got to agree with you. If you noticed in our conversation, I never once said the word Republican.
Yeah.
Or Democrat.
Yeah, and I'm just saying that's the conversation, and I notice I didn't say it either. It's a conversation by all.
Absolutely right. And here's the issue, and it's why I was an independent for 31 years, quite frankly. Look, we can disagree, but we don't have to be divisive about it. And that's how I ran my last campaign, and that's how I'm going to do it this time. I may have disagreements. Well, that's why we have a democracy, so we can disagree. We don't have a dictator. But on the other hand, just like we do in the Navy, you come together at the end. We are the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and we are the United States of America. And that's why I want to learn trust. Look, my district was 57% Republican, 33% Democrat when I won my first race. I was only the second Democrat to ever win that congressional district outside Philadelphia since the Civil War. But I had to raise over $3 million to win. My second race, how much I spent? $28,000 to put up yard signs. And I won by 20 points because the office was open. I'd listen to people. And I could disagree, but I never would put down the Republican Party. I may have disagreed. Now, I will disagree extremely with some of the Republican leadership, but gosh, those Republicans elected me.
There you go. One of the things that is most bothersome right now, you've got a lot of experience with this, having been an admiral, the idea of how we're dealing with terrorism, and you talked about being held responsible.
With terrorists, you said?
With terrorism, yeah, terrorism in general.
Yes.
And we'll probably have to come back and answer this after the break, but I'll pose a question to you now. You look at a president right now who won't say Islamic extremism, who won't add that word. We look at a president who won't show up and stand with the rest of the world against terrorism, as we saw the other day in Paris. Are we doing it the right way? What are we missing right now? What could we be doing better in fighting terrorism around the world? I'm going to ask you that question when we come back. Joe Sestak with us here on the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA, and he'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA with former Congressman and former Admiral in the U.S. Navy, Joe Sestak, and we thank him for his service to our country, as always. Joe, I asked you before we went to the break about terrorism, and we have a president right now who, for a lot of us, won't say the word Islamic terrorism. When you look around the world, there's a common thread that's been going on, whether it's Boko Haram, whether it's ISIS, whether it's Al-Qaeda, whatever name you want to call it, but there's a common thread going on around the world. It's not to say that there's not any other kind of terrorism, but it is to say the vast majority is here. Is the president getting it right or wrong in the way he's dealing with it?
Well, let me answer it with 4 quick points. The word that I was disappointed that they had dropped was the global war on terror. This is a war. And when I was in the Pentagon, I put together the first brief that went up to Mr. Rumsfeld, the Chief of Naval Operations, that said this is going to go on for at least a decade, if not more. Number 2, we need allies in order to win, because the threat primarily comes from overseas. Let's take France. We should have been marching down there, arm in arm, with them, with all the other leaders of the world. But second, keep in mind, the statue that's closest to the Oval Office in the White House where the Commander-in-Chief lives is of a French general who won our Yorktown battle to give us our freedom, General Rochambeau. We need allies. Third, intelligence. Look, this war is primarily going to be fought through cyberspace. We got to read and know everything of where they are. And NSA has a role to play in that. And last, there's also other elements that come about besides just military. Cut off the lifeblood of what they need, which is money and other things. And we need to be more aggressive at that. This is a war with allies. And often the means to win it is going to come through cyberspace so we know where they are hiding. And second, cut off everything else through elements like our Treasury Department, bringing the IMF, World Bank, and everybody to clamp down on them every day to it.
You mentioned about carrying on a war. You wanted to hear them say again the war on global terror. My understanding of war, and you have a much closer understanding of this having been in the military, is to take away the will to fight for the other side. In this case, the other side being that of terror. And yet one looks at all this right now and we say, are we taking away their will to fight? Are we doing anything at all? Now, I know that the president would say we decimated a lot of al-Qaeda's leadership, and that is very true. And they've killed a lot of those people, and that is also very true. And yet at the same time, it seems like it has morphed or metastasized into something else. How do we deal with that in taking away their will to want to continue to fight? Not only us, but I would say civilization around the world.
The answer to your question is the following that I like to say. Militaries can stop a problem.
Right.
But we, the military, cannot fix a problem. Even after we stopped Nazism in Germany, the military, to fix Germany, it took the other elements of our power, the Marshall Plan to fix it. Take Iraq, sure. We went in there, but did we fix it?
Right.
No. It takes other elements of our power. So at the end of the day, it is eventually about our military stopping problems, first and foremost. But second of all, eventually over time, the other elements of our power, the economy, the improvement in the world, for ourselves, but in the world, the improvement of education. 98% of women in Afghanistan are illiterate. What do you think they get their information from?
Right, exactly.
My take is it's going to be a long, slow process to stop the will because it's going to go into the hearts and minds. But in the meantime, number one constitutional duty of a senator and a president is the defense of our nation.
When you look at this long process right now, obviously I think a lot of us have come around to the idea that you can't do nation building, that people are not going to be like us. That's in some cases hundreds and thousands of years of history have dictated how they live together. You look at a country like Afghanistan that resists change tooth and nail because they're operated by more like the Loya Jirga, this whole group of tribesmen who pretty much control the country. So we look at those and we say, well, we can't really bring democracy there. And yet at the same time, it seems to me that we have to be as fervent in attacking the bad guys and not allowing them to be the influence as they are fervently trying to gain influence around the world in attacking us and gaining more people and more converts along the way.
Second part of your statement there, totally agree with in the sense that that's why NSA, cyberspace, because to find these guys who hide in caves that sometimes communicate literally just by some guy riding a horse to the next country to communicate because they know we're listening. That's number one, to do what you said. Number two, I also agree with the front part of your message. Look, we should not be imposing democracy like some people thought we were going to try to do in Iraq.
We can't.
But we can, to the benefit of us, do what you might call nation building for our own interest. Take, for example, the Export-Import Bank that some want to do away with. Wait a minute. For every $1 billion small businesses sell overseas, we create several thousand jobs here. And if we're able to do, quote, nation building in an economic way that opens up Afghanistan in a sense to where we can, with a secure environment, we're able to do business there. We create jobs for ourselves. They create jobs. And when you're doing pretty decently, you're not as prone to want to be a terrorist.
The problem right now is getting that kind of secure atmosphere in which maybe that can take place, and that's the ongoing problem. Joe, I always wish we had more time. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. Looking forward to covering the campaigns that you and Pat Toomey run. You guys did a great job last time. I think it demonstrated you don't have to be horrible to each other to run a campaign, and yet I know you'll be very, very different on ideas. So we're looking forward to having that along the way and chatting with you as we go.
Great, and I'm looking forward to stopping by again and seeing you, okay?
You're always welcome to be in here, Joe. We're looking forward to having you in, as well as Pat. He stops by as well. So thank you so much for being with us today. Let's talk again very soon, and take care.